to the active shared fantasy. And at first, his intimate partner is usually adulating. The intimate partner is an admirer, fulfills the role of an admirer. And at that point, experiences maximal grandiosity. The existence or the presence of an adulating, admiring intimate partner, the unparalleled experience of maximal grandiosity. I can compare this perhaps only to a drug high, a high of pure, unadulterated heroin or crack. It's something out of this world, this feeling of maximal grandiosity, because grandiosity is expansive. It expands like the Big Bang. It creates a whole universe, subsumes the universe. He becomes the world, he becomes the universe. And so he becomes almost godlike, if not godlike. The presence of an intimate partner is what makes this possible. Omnipotent, capable of anything and everything, miraculously perfect, unblemishedly accomplished, impeccable, perfect, brilliant, the epitome and culmination of creation. It's possible to attain this sensation, it's possible to experience this sensation in other circumstances. For example, winning an election, making a lot of money, passing an exam publicly, being applauded if you're an actor. There are many ways, many paths, many routes, but all these routes, all these alternatives require a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of work, a lot of investment in inordinate amounts of time and resources. And above all, they require repeated interaction with people. They require a lot of pretension, faking it till you make it, a lot of collaboration and cooperation and cooptation, surviving the inferior so as to let them enable you. He feels that everyone around him is half human or Untermensch, not only superior by virtue of special skills or special talents, superior by his mere existence. His intelligence is superior, his looks are superior, his accomplishments are superior or could be superior. Everything about him is utterly out of this world and definitely out of the confines and remit of human affairs. So to be forced to spend your time with inferior creatures just because it's a prerequisite for experiencing maximal grandiosity is a bit self-defeating. It's a contradiction in terms. It's almost mutually exclusive. How can you experience maximal grandiosity if you depend on other people to attain it, to obtain it, to secure it? And indeed, this is a conflict. The dependence on their sources of supply. They need the sources of supply. They are utterly addicted to the sources of supply, but they also detest and hate them. An intimate partner is a shortcut. It's simply a shortcut. You have to suffer the ineluctable existence of a single individual, inferior as she may be. You can idealize her much more easily, so you need not think of her as inferior, actually. If you are interacting with the idealized image, you can pretend that she is not inferior. And then she provides a shortcut to magical, maximal, universal, godlike grandiosity. That's why they are addicted to secondary supply, addicted to the kind of supply provided only by intimate partners, mates, spouses, and so on. And that's why breakups are very complicated. Can't just let it go simply. The intimate partner fulfills various roles, possibly the most important of which, it's a drug. She's a drug. She's the exact equivalent of a prescribed substance, class A substance. She's a drug. He consumes his intimate partner so as to experience the hallucinatory, mushroom-like experience of maximal grandiosity. She is the path. She is the Tao. She is the Tao. She is the way. She is the Logos. She is the journey to perfection, to completion, to feeling whole, to feeling God. So if you have to work hard for decades and then experience maximal grandiosity, you can shortcut this process and within 3 months find an intimate partner who would make you feel exactly the same. And this perfect grandiose state is a regression, of course. It's a regression to an infantile state. It's a regression to very, very early childhood, 6 months old. You see, at that stage, the child feels one with the world. There are no boundaries. Child, mother, world, they are all one entity. The child cannot make and does not make a distinction. I end here, the world begins here. The child merges, fuses seamlessly with his mother as a representation and an agent of the world. And so this is an infantile state, a regressive state, a boundaryless state. And it can be accomplished only if the mother is good enough. A good enough mother is a term, a phrase invented by the famous pediatrician turned psychologist David Winnicott to describe a mother who provides this environment, holding environment, accepting environment, unconditional love, the environment in which the child gradually can begin to disengage from her and separate and explore the world. We'll talk about it in a minute. So you need a good enough mother for this. She needs to be what is called in psychology, in child psychology, a safe base. She needs to be someone you can abandon safely for half an hour and go play with other kids. Someone you can walk away from in order to explore a flower or a puppy or a tree or just the sky with clouds. To find yourself in the world and to find the world in you, you need to feel that she has your back. Mommy, mother has your back, that she is safe and that she is a base, some place you can go back to. And so the mother is critical in this. The mother is critical in this phase of childhood, is trying to parentify his intimate partner, to convert her into a safe base, into a good enough mother, to allow him to again experience the unmitigated, grandiose state of early childhood. Because it's enmeshment, it's fusion, it's merger, not only with the mother figure or with the intimate partner in this case, but with the entire world. It's an indescribable state, akin, similar very much to how nirvana is described. Nirvana in Eastern mystical traditions, enlightenment in Eastern mystical traditions is described this way: a loss of the ego and then merger, fusion with the world, with the universe, the realization that that all the distinctions and all the boundaries are actually very artificial. They're man-made. You made them. And since you made them, you can also undo them. You can remove these boundaries, these limitations, these fences, and you can be one with the world again. This oneness is not about enlightenment. It's about control. It's about power. It's a power play. It's sometimes sadism, the ability to inflict pain, the gratifying ability to inflict pain. His motivations are adulterated. He wants to regress to the child infantile state. He wants to feel maximally grandiose. He wants to feel one with the world. But he wants to feel one with the world so that he can mutilate the world, punish the world, control the world, tell the world what to do. And all this is accomplished instantaneously with the right intimate partner, an adulating, admiring partner, a partner who tells you he can do nothing wrong. This kind of enabler is ideal. It's not that he seeks, he doesn't look for that intentionally. But if he comes across it, of course it's best. It's a good enough safe base mother. And it allows actually to feel safe enough, having gone back, having teleported, having transported himself back to childhood through the agency of this surrogate mother, his intimate partner. Now he finds himself in childhood. Now, therefore, there's no risk. Because if he is in full control, and if he is the world, and if he is God, what's the risk? So now he can allow himself to separate and to individuate. Is a disruption, an attachment dysfunction, and a disruption in the process, in the very critical process of separation and individuation. Primary object, usually his mother, does not allow him to become a separate individual, does not let him develop his own boundaries, does not blackmails him into remaining with her, staying with her, does not untangle the enmeshment, the fusion and the merger between them. She insists on remaining a single organism with two heads. But with the right intimate partner, the narcissist feels grandiose enough, strong enough, perfect enough, brilliant enough, omniscient and omnipotent enough, and everything enough to try now to separate, to try now to individuate. And this, of course, explains the approach, avoidance, repetition, compulsion, the intermittent reinforcement. Why one day he loves you, the next he hates you. Why the hot and cold. Those of you who are mothers know what I'm talking about. A child is like that. All children have repetition compulsions, approach avoidance. All of them approach and then avoid. You cannot really predict a child because he's experimenting. He's experimenting with his individuality. He is creating himself, he's generating himself in contrast to you, in comparison with you. You are the background against which he emerges and delineates and demarcates himself. So, if you are the right intimate partner, if you are a functional intimate partner, then feels safe enough to do exactly this. So he runs towards you and hugs your leg as a child would, but then he runs away from you and explores the world. He separates from you and individuates because he sees you as a mother. And he begins to experience himself as a constellated, functioning self. That is the unparalleled Disneyland of the mind. If you are a functional, intimate partner, then feels safe enough to do exactly this. So he runs towards you and hugs your leg as a child would, but then he runs away from you and explores the world. He separates from you and individuates because he sees you as a mother. And he begins to experience himself as a constellated, functioning self, the unparalleled Disneyland of the mind. He doesn't have an ego. That's the irony. He can't be an egotist because he doesn't have an ego. He doesn't have a self. Jung said that his introversion was unsuccessful. He did not succeed to introvert properly. But in any case, he doesn't have a functioning constellated self. But through you, he can experience a constellated functioning self. It's a great pity, and it's ironic, that this self that he's experiencing is actually the false self. In other words, you allow to actually get in touch with his false self, to interact with his false self, to communicate and to interrogate his false self, sometimes to doubt his false self. Never forgives you for this. Never. You should realize this. If you are a truly good intimate partner, you will pay a dear price. No good deed goes unpunished. You have empowered to own his life, to be in his life, to feel responsible for his life, and to interact with his false self. That is something we'll never forget and will never forgive. Exhilarating as this experience is, it also sows the seeds. It creates the foundation of mortification, which comes inexorably later in this process. So the intimate partner can provide a full experience of the false self in the active shared fantasy, and a direct experience of the true self via mortification. Mortification is seen face to face with himself as he is seen through others. So when he no longer can deny who he is, he can no longer repress it, he can no longer invent stories and narratives and wish it away. Mortification is the end game, the last station in the line, faces himself. And it is the intimate partner that provides him with this experience by abandoning him. An intimate partner provides the full experience of the false self when she is admiring, when she's a playmate, and above all, when she agrees to play the role of a mother. But then when she inevitably abandons, when she no longer is willing to pay the price of her own suppression, of her own vanishing, and therefore is forced to live. When this happens, there's mortification. And again gets in touch, this time with another construct, not with the false self, but with the true self. These are two unforgivable effects of the intimate partner. Therefore, will always hate his intimate partner. This is not real object relations. As in object relations, you should have an object. You relate to an object. That's why it's called an object relation. It doesn't see you as a separate thing, as a thing out there. You're not out there. You are in here. It's part of self-loathing and self-hatred. The more you inhabit, the more you occupy, the more you are resident in the mind, the more he hates you, because the more he hates you himself. The more he becomes aware of his false self through you, the more he hates himself. And because you're part of himself, the more he hates you, the more you mortify him. And because of the mortification, he comes to learn who he truly is, his true self. He hates himself for this, because you're an integral part of his identity, of his mind, of his landscape of introjects, landscape of internal objects. He hates you as well. The libidinal investment, as psychoanalysts call it, the investment of the life force, the libido, is in the self, not in the outside, not in you. It includes also sex drive. Not in you, but in himself. Think about the sex. This sexuality is not adult sexuality. It's not mature sexuality. It's a form of self-soothing, masturbatory, autoeroticism. It's self-directed, physically, literally self-directed. Unfortunately, I can't give you a demonstration right now. It's self-directed. It's autoerotic. Finds himself to be very arousing. He is his own erotic object. Through you. He sees himself through you. If you find him attractive, if you find him irresistible, he is attracted to himself through you. It's actually self-love by proxy, and you are the proxy. Sex is coupled with sadism. Sadism could be physical, could be psychological, it could be humiliation or kink or BDSM, but there's always an element of sadism, objectifying you, using you as an object, using you as an animated sex doll. Even during the sex act, shows you that he wants to destroy you because you are an intruding object. Destroying your proofs that he has power over you, upholds and buttresses his omnipotence, godlike omnipotence. It's very mixed here. You are part of him. He hates himself, so he hates you. You allow him to communicate with himself. He hates you for this. He doesn't want to communicate with himself, so he hates you for this as well. And finally, you have power over him, so he wants to destroy you. Because how can you have power over him? He's God. He's omnipotent, and he's going to destroy you for this. He's proud of his utter independence. He's proud of the fact that allegedly no one has power over him. He is the most powerful. Somehow is dimly aware that he cannot maintain meaningful communication with the outside and with the inside. He feels, he experiences, he lives through. This is his quiddity, this is his essence. It's like all sentences end in the middle. No point is ever reached. There's no punchline. He tells himself, he's trying to justify this, he's trying to explain to himself why he can't communicate normally with people, why he can't communicate normally with himself. And he says, well, probably because I'm too intelligent, or I'm too unique, idiosyncratic. I have nothing in common with these people. How can they ever understand me? Why try? In an active shared fantasy, the intimate partner facilitates communication with the false self. And the false self is the only interlocutor, the only partner with whom can communicate. So the false self, don't forget, it has attributes of God. It knows everything. It's all powerful. It's perfect. It's brilliant. It's infallible. Never makes mistakes. It's God. Agrees, accepts communication with the false self. It's his equal. The false self is his equal. Here again, there's a contradiction in terms. He needs a conveyor belt. He needs a transmission mechanism. In this case, the intimate partner. So the only interlocutor amenable is the false self. But to communicate with the false self to a much inferior entity, you. And that pisses him off, irritates him no end. His dependence on you to talk to himself is very grating and aggravating. You also provide obliquely access to emotional and other modes of communication which are not goal-oriented, usually pronounced. Antisocial dimension, so he's usually defiant and this and that, but he's goal-oriented. Now the goal could be irrational. The goal could be self-defeating or idiotic. The goal could be supply, for example. But whatever else you say, most are self-efficacious, or they would not have survived. His intimate partner encourages him to have what we call non-sublimatory libidinal investment in cathexis. Did I impress you? No. Let me explain. We all have urges and drives, and many of these urges and drives situated in the id, according to Freud. Anyhow, many of these urges and drives are socially unacceptable. You want to jump the drop-dead gorgeous, sexy date of your colleague, but you don't. You don't because it's bad for you, bad for him, probably bad for her. You don't because society frowns on such behavior. And so instead what you do, you sublimate. You sublimate this energy. Sublimation means acting in socially condoned, socially conforming, and socially acceptable ways to discharge energies, drives, and urges which are normally not socially acceptable or even criminal. So the intimate partner encourages to actually look himself in the mirror in a variety of ways. Look his false self in the mirror. If she mortifies him, she forces him to look his real self, true self in the mirror. But one way or another, she forces him to not sublimate. She forces him to acknowledge, accept, recognize, and finally perhaps adopt the real drives and urges in a way that would gratify him or help him be more at one with himself. She makes him whole. In a way, she integrates, if she's a proper intimate partner in an active shared fantasy, and fulfills her roles, her functions as admirer, playmate, and mother, she helps accept himself. She redirects his libido, the investment of his libido, his libidinal investment, and his cathexis, his emotional investment. She redirects them so in a way that is more congruent, more fitting, more acceptable, more egosyntonic, in a way that would not feel alien and estranged and wrong. Through the agency of the intimate partner, feels that it's okay. He is okay. The world is okay. You remember the famous book? I'm okay, you're okay. Everything suddenly is okay. It is this feeling of relief, relaxation, anxiety reduction, and amelioration. The intimate partner is like a good anxiolytic and antidepressant rolled into one, palatable pill. Suddenly, he can open his eyes without weariness, without paranoia, without fear, without reticence. Just open his eyes and just be, without any goal, just be. And it feels good, but it also feels ominous because to just be is to be like everyone else, cannot be like everyone else. And so he begins to regard his intimate partner as a threat because she renders him human. And whatever else he wants to be when he grows up, he does not definitely want to be human.